Hi, Gavin.
Hi, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a sponsored webinar by DiviPay, which is hosted by CPA Australia. Today's webinar is titled How Virtual Cards Can Improve Cash Flow and Can Be Used to Prevent Payment Fraud. My name is Gavin Ord, and I am the Senior Business Policy Manager here at CPA Australia. We have people joining us from all over the world for today's webinar, and I'd just like to extend my welcome to you and thank you for joining us. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from around Australia and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend this acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us today. It's now my pleasure today to invite Cale Boogel, Head of Sales at DiviPay, and Trent McLaren, Head of Accounting at DiviPay. Today, as Lauren said, we'll be taking questions through our Q&A box. Please direct questions to all panelists. We will try to address all the questions at the conclusion of today's webinar, and we'll do our best with the time remaining. For any troubleshooting queries, please send a message to the host using the chat box. It's now time for our session to commence, so I'll hand over to Cale. Thank you, Cale.
Thanks, Gavin. Hi, everyone. My name's Cale. I obviously work with DiviPay, based out of Sydney, in the tech side now, but used to be a humble accountant working from a local firm in Sydney. And look, it's great to be here, and thanks to CPA Australia for having us.
Hello everyone, my name's Trent McLaren. I'm the Head of Accounting here at DiviPay. I've been working in and around the accounting industry for nearly 10 years. The thing I'm most proud of, I actually won Thought Leader of the Year at the Australian Accounting Awards in 2017. I don't know what that means. Apparently some of the thoughts are useful. So I hope some of the thoughts that we come out across with today are also very useful for you as well. Today's topic, as Gavin pointed out, is how virtual cards can help improve cash flow and prevent payment fraud. And what we want to do and spend a lot of time at the start of this session is actually pointing out some of the statistics around employee fraud that happen globally across the world, and just some of the things that we can do to help prevent that. DiviPay, we'll touch on a little bit, but we have built a solution basically on the back of the pain and problems that we see in space. Now, some of the points we're going to cover aren't necessarily related to that. There's other good nuggets and takeaways here that you can implement in the business that you work in or the firm that you're working in. And yeah, if you've got any questions, queries, please feel free to jump into the Q&A, and we'd love to engage and talk with you there. As mentioned, you've got Cale and myself. If you are on social media, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, feel free to connect, say hello. If you hear something you like, give us a tweet. If you hear something you hate, feel free to tweet that as well. We don't discriminate against tweets at all. If we jump into what we're going to cover over this session today, so the challenges that we see for small to mid-sized enterprise when it comes to employee fraud and best ways to help minimize spend within a business. There is a small portion where we'd love to show you exactly what we do at DiviPay, and then we've got Q&A for you as well. Let's start with some statistics. Now, I was looking at these this morning, and Cale, I'm going to let you jump to the next slide for me. Oh, we're polling. We're polling first. Fantastic. Let's start with the poll. So this is just going to help us understand the pain points you have in your firm. So what do your finance teams struggle with the most? Is it chasing up receipts? Is it producing employee expense reports, completing reimbursements and bank reconciliations in reasonable time? Or is it managing out of budget / unauthorized expenses? So this will run for another 25 seconds. So feel free to let us know the biggest struggle you have in your finance team at the moment. 15 more seconds. Again, those answers were chasing up receipts, producing employee expense reports, completing reimbursements and bank recs, managing out of budget / unauthorized expenses. I get to put one in too. What am I going to choose? That'll do. Yeah, okay. Submitting. Fantastic. The results. Well, a lot of you said managing. Sorry, I need to move my screen across because it's shortened. The answer, D. Most of you selected D. And A, chasing receipts. Very cool. Okay, interesting. Kale, next slide. Thank you, mate. Put this in the Q&A. We talk about budget bandits quite a lot and the causes of pain in the business. And we talked a little bit about this there, but when you think about the pain that you see, tell me in the comments or the Q&A, what gives you the most annoying? Is it the careless spender, the overspender, or the exuberant spender? We call these the budget bandits. They're quite fun. I think for me, I think I land in the exuberant spender. Kale, where do you land?
I'm actually usually pretty good. I'm quite frugal, although I've had a few times.
You are an accountant. You are an ex-accountant.
I have had a few times, twice this quarter actually, where I had to ask for a bit of a budget increase and overspent what was planned. But sometimes it happens, and I got approval, so all good.
Right. Well, I can see a few exuberant spenders, overspenders. I think overspenders is a killer there, isn't it? Or the careless spender. Awesome. Let's jump into the. So when we talk about employee fraud internally, we can see that employees cause 90% of all significant theft and losses within a business. 60% of employees would steal if they knew they wouldn't get caught. 34% of millennials justify stealing from their job. 72% of all occupational fraud is committed by men. Wow. Not sure how I feel about that. Top 3 sectors where insider attacks occur are finance, insurance, and healthcare. Finance and insurance have highest numbers of perpetrators who are business partners, followed by healthcare and IT. Every year, businesses lose $50 billion as a result of employee theft. And I'll just skip to one of the last ones here, but 1/3 of cases occur because there's a lack of internal controls. Now, some of this you're probably thinking, hey, we know this already, Trent. We know that employee fraud and theft occurs. What are we going to do about it? Now, there's a couple of things we'll dive into. We wanted to give you some unique, specific cases on the types of fraud and theft. And Kale, if you go to the next slide for me, mate. Looking at the key financial risks, and Kale, I'll throw to you on this because I know you work with a lot of partners in this sense, but what are the key challenges you've heard the statistics and the data points. Firstly, what were you most surprised by when you heard or saw those statistics for the first time?
I mean, when I saw those stats for the first time, I was kind of just shocked at how high some of those percentages are and how common it is. Like, I know it's common. I talk with businesses every day that have experienced fraud, but it's always, when you see the stats, you just never expect it to be as high as what it is. But when we talk about the specific financial risks facing SMEs, the most common that I see is theft from staff, whether it be through a corporate card program that they have, or I've even heard a number of stories where staff are on a reimbursement process in the business. Let's say they're out to lunch, they spend $50, they'll actually go and grab a receipt from the other table that says they've spent $100 or $150 and process that reimbursement. So they're spending 50 of their own money and they're actually claiming 100 or 150 back, which gets approved, reimbursed, and they're literally stealing straight from the business's pocket.
Now, for a lot of the CPA members, we know that you're operating in a particular environment where fraud is most common to occur. Feel free to put in your own examples. What have you seen happen in your organization or something close to that? But where do you see the most common risks of fraud in your business? Again, a lot of this typically happens like when we think about how far technology's come in, we're in 2021. There's a lot of new ways to report and check on all the information that's coming through. But outside of technology, we actually need to guide our own internal ethics, our company policies, and that needs to stay in tune. A lot of our attitude towards these things needs to be governed by the business. And I think the CFO in the business has a huge role to play in exactly how employees are trusted or not trusted, but they're governed by you. The systems, policies, processes you put in place, or that your teams put in place, are led by you. So when we start thinking about all these different processes we're about to dive into, if you're still doing some of this in Post-it notes, I've seen reimbursements all done on paper still only yesterday. I was like, how do you know that these are true or valid or whatever it may be? Some of this is still done in Excel spreadsheets. you're responsible. You're opening yourself up for these types of risks if you're still managing these systems in an archaic way. When we talk about cash-intensive processes, we see a lot of organisations that use gift cards or have to get cash out to give to their team members to go and help. See this in a lot of non-for-profits and charities and so forth. How do you keep track of that? How are you supposed to manage that? These are the kinds of things I want to challenge you with this morning to think through. Well, what am I doing within my own organisation to help ensure that we are not at risk and we're minimising everything that we're doing? Kale, can you give me an example of the blowouts that come through? Now, I've got a great example, but I'll let you go. How do you minimise the cost blowouts when you're talking through SMEs?
So the main way or the best way that I see to manage cost blowouts, look, they happen, right? Particularly when businesses are growing, you set budgets and you kind of go, things are going great, let's spend more than we have. But we commonly see that budgets that are set within a business are never actually tied back and linked to any, tangible spending platform, or they don't really have a control. In our accounting system or our forecasting tool, we have a budget. Let's say it's 10K a month, but then we just have these people that are spending, and they don't really have constant visibility or reminders over what that budget is. And then we're always looking retrospectively, and we go, oh, last month, look, we did it again. We spent more than our 10K limit. So those are the most common things, I think, when budgets aren't properly communicated, and they're only reviewed on a retrospective basis. Like, how did we go to budget, rather than tracking it, day by day and week by week.
And I might just actually, Gavin, I'm putting you on the spot here. I apologise, but we had a really good chat before the session started. And I actually wondered if I could bring you back on camera and just talk through, from your perspective, because on the CPA side, some of the most common scenarios you hear about or see when it comes to internal fraud in organisations, from members' perspectives at least?
Yeah, so interesting question. There's a range of things from just taking advantage of an opportunity to a more systematic, well-planned fraud that can go out for many years. The ones that obviously get the media attention are those big frauds which go on for many years.
Yep.
And as you point out, often those who commit those frauds have very high levels of trust. They're charismatic. All the warning signs I think everyone on this webinar would be aware of. But the other thing I'd point out is I think every member I've spoken to has experienced a fraud at one point throughout their professional lives, and tried to manage that. And often the question they come back to me is, oh, look, I've discovered the fraud. What do I do next? And that's the question they keep asking. Do I report to police? What do I do?
And that's a really good question. And this was obviously part of I like to call the pre-game when you come to these things, but part of that pre-game discussion was exactly what you just said. And it's super interesting. If you are asking that question, well, what do I do when I get someone like that? Again, I said this before, this is governed by you and how you are positioning the business and how you want to position your policies within the business. If I can say it depends on the type of theft. It's a minimal theft, it's first time, there's a unique scenario. Or I can say you need to draw a line in the sand and say a theft is a theft and you need to report that and do what you need to do with that to help protect future businesses that could be impacted by these potential fraudsters. And they're all out there. You heard the statistics at the start that we went through. It's typically the people that have been in your organization the longest. They know where all the skeletons are. They know all the gaps within your systems and processes. They know how to steal money from you without you knowing about it, right? So it's your obligation as the CFO, as the person that's in charge of finance, to understand, how do we protect ourselves? How do we keep this super diligent, very transparent, and very open to make sure that this business is free or risk-free from overspending? Gavin, I appreciate you stepping in to answer that. Was there anything else on that you wanted to bring up?
I just want to say, when we've engaged in members and they have gone through a big fraud, often they reflect back and go, the problem actually commenced almost at the time that they were interviewing the person. And And when they reflect back, they often think, oh, look, the questions from that person are really quite strange. But on the reflection, they're thinking that the fraudster was actually just finding out whether that business had those lax controls, whether they don't have appropriate technologies in place. So it goes from the very start, from the interviewing a person all the way through. You've got to have those controls in place.
I love it, and I completely agree. So the first takeaway for everyone that's on this call today, there's three key things you need to look at to help prevent risk and fraud in your organization. What is the culture around spending and money that's coming in or out of the business? Do you have ethics and policies in place to help report things when they go wrong? Now, things are going to go wrong. It just happens. It's just, I can walk outside today. Here's the thing. I woke up at 7 and my power's been turned off, emergency power, 3 hours. I can't control that. Things just happen. Yeah, right now we're running on my phone Wi-Fi, and let's just hope it stays that way for the next 40 minutes. But things happen, and you need to be prepared for when things happen. We don't know. We can't predict the future. There's certain things we can predict, and we can be pretty sure that everything's going to be okay tomorrow. But when it doesn't, what are we going to do? And that's why it's your obligation to be both responsible for the ethics of the organization around finance, responsible for what happens when things go wrong, and thirdly, you're responsible for how things are reported in terms of your systems and information and what you're giving back to your CEO, the GM, or maybe you are in that position where you're responsible for governing that for everyone else. It's your job to help everyone else succeed. If we just jumping through some of the problems we see on the financial stack side of things, Gavin, thank you so much, mate. That was awesome. The problems we see in the financial stack is that, and I alluded to this at the start, if you're still doing things in paper, Excel, spreadsheets, anything that's not connected to your accounting ledger and software, there's a lot of room for gaps and errors there. Now, if you already know that, I apologize. If you didn't know that and you're like, well, it's just the way it is, it's just what I stepped into, this is just what I inherited, that's okay too. There's ways to work around and fix this still as well. But the challenge we see is that anytime we come to payments and financial control stacks, everything's disconnected. You've got payment tools, B-paying, bill paying, card payments, reimbursements that are all manual or they're adjusted in payroll manually, which is super painful. Then you've got approvals and procurement. Sometimes approval is just an SMS from my boss saying, hey, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you can do that. Can you pay that? Yeah, sure, no worries. Does anyone get those dodgy emails these days where the CEO is saying, hey, Trent, I need you to urgently call me about a transfer. I need 10 gift cards for $100 each. That happened to a good friend of mine only 2 weeks ago. And he's the kind of guy that's like, that would never happen to us. That's stupid. His team member calls him later and says, hey, I've got those gift cards you wanted. He's like, what are you talking about? I didn't ask for any gift cards. Like, yeah, you sent me an email. You said, get me 10 gift cards for $100 each. My internet was down. I couldn't text you. I just ran off and got them. Where do you want me to send these things? He didn't. This happens every day to the people that you think it might not even happen to. The fraudsters and scamsters out there, they should have an MBA. They're damn smart people sometimes, right? When we talk about spend and data management, we've got a whole bunch of different tools, and actually there is a lot of really good technology in this space. You're using tools like Receipt Bank, HubDoc, or Dex, I should say, Expensify, Zero Expenses. But again, they don't always connect and communicate to everything, and we can still see gaps if we don't have that full stack running. And lastly, when we're using technology that doesn't integrate with our accounting software, we're creating more gaps and issues. Every time I have to export a CSV and import it into my accounting software is another room for error. This is just a small sample of the things that we see. Outside of the tech, Kyle, you jumped way too quick for me, mate. I can't speak that quick.
Sorry, mate. I apologize.
All good. So when we look at the inefficiencies within roles within organization, as the CFO, you might have a team of accounts payable, you might have some bookkeepers, you might have strategic finance partners, but they all sit across different processes. So you don't necessarily have one person that does everything. You've got people that do different and certain elements of the job, which means they need to be across 2, 3, 4, or 5 systems. Every time I have to give someone access to my client bank account with read-only access or becoming a joint signatory is a bad day, because I am again opening myself up to the risks of someone potentially stealing from our business. Now, I paint this big doom and gloom, and I apologize. That was not necessarily my intention, but these are the things that we do need to be mindful of. And there are solutions and practices that you can put in place to help prevent all of these things. And that is exactly why we're here. This is a big mission for the DiviPay team, is trying to help you consolidate all of this into one place. Our whole mission and vision is that you have one secure place to manage all of your business spending. So whether that's virtual cards, which you're going to see a little bit of, whether that's bill payments, it's procurement, it's approvals, it's all of your subscriptions, even payroll payments. We're looking at how do we make that a more secure process where we can absolutely kill ABA files and not have them running inside your practice. How do we get so that when you want to lower the budget of all of your employees next month, it's not just an email out saying, hey, can you guys try and spend less this month? Because that's not going to work, right? What if we actually had the ability to, bring that back into our control, minimize those limits, minimize those budgets? We can't do that with traditional credit cards. Next slide. Thanks, Kyle. Cool. We're up to polls. I love polls. They're great. We're going to run this one. So what are you currently using for your expense card, corporate card, company card? Is it multiple physical cards? So you've set up a card through the bank. You've had to do an application for each person. Maybe you've had to do a lot. You've had to tie this to your personal assets. You're already using virtual cards. Awesome. I'd love to understand more about that. Personal bank accounts. Actually, I've got a cousin who owns a real estate business, and all of the employees do everything on their personal cards. I was like, why is that the case? Why do you do it that way? Lastly, you got one physical bank card, and we share that card around with employees. The funniest story, it's not even funny. It's funny because it's terrible. That's why it's funny. Story I'd ever heard was someone who had their card photocopied, and they printed out 30 copies of that card, and they gave it to everyone on the office floor and just said, whenever you need to make a payment, you just pull out that photocopy, just punch in those numbers, and just, drop the receipt on the admin's desk at the end. I'm like, how do you know who spent what? Like, oh no, we don't. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. Awesome. Multiple cards, one card getting shared around. Yeah, okay, interesting, nice. Next slide, thank you, Kale. So we've propped up and discussed a lot about the data points, the why, the problems that are there, both from our what we can do about it from a policy piece, the role that we play in that, and how we can help make that happen in organisation. Thirdly, now we want to just try to highlight the reason we exist to try and help solve these pain points and problems. So when we think about digital and virtual cards, if you've never used a virtual card before, that's okay. These things happen. It's new technology. It is very secure. But essentially what this allows you to do is start issuing company cards with set limits and controls to anyone in your team, wherever they are in the world. As long as they've got an Apple or a Google orientated digital wallet, they have the ability to start making payments securely, where you get full visibility on every single transaction, where they spent it, who they spent it with. They've got the option to upload their expense receipts as well. And within that, if you want to block certain merchant codes and say, actually, I don't want you spending at the casino, hey, we can fix that. That's a big part of what these restrictions allow you to do. Not to be the fun police, obviously, but we do need to put these things in. Issuing cards is really simple. It happens in seconds. Anyone on this call, we could actually issue you with a card right now with $5 each if we wanted to. We're not waiting for it to come in the mail. We're not waiting for Australia Post to arrive 3 weeks later. I had a bet with a customer the other week. I said, if I can help you get a card, he'd already been waiting 3 weeks. His ANZ card was due to arrive that day. I said, if we do this right now, I bet you I can get you a card sooner than your other one. Long story short, I did win. His card didn't arrive for another 3 weeks. So it took 6 weeks to get a card. His wife was out that afternoon. They were shopping at Officeworks. And this is the power that we get with technology. On the back of all the payments that start coming through, you as the CFO in your organization will get much better, richer, cleaner data with these transactions taking place. We help create live data feeds. We capture the merchant info, the GST, the expense categories, and we can push all of that into your accounting software. If you're not using cloud accounting, we still have the ability to export all of that information into that piece of software as well. Next one slide. Thank you, mate. So what I want to do is take a moment and let Kale actually show you what that looks like and how that works. If you've got questions, please chuck them into the Q&A in the chat. But Kale, mate, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Trent. I think before we dive into the technology side, I just want to drill a little bit deeper on a couple of two things that you touched on. We can implement all the technology in the world, but if we don't have the right policies and processes built on top, it's not going to achieve nearly close to the results that we want. I can't describe how many different businesses I've seen and worked with that don't have strict policies implemented. When it comes to fraud and even more broadly, just wasteful spending in the business, these policies consist of, approval policies, who can approve what, at what limit can they approve, etc. Vendor management policies, who can update or change supplier bank details for payment, for example. And of course, a really big one and top of mind for today is employee spend policies, right? And these policies really should be almost like a contract between the employer and the employee on, if they're a spender in the business, what can they spend? What can't they spend on? What are their limits? And just as importantly, as an employee, what their responsibilities are as a spender within the business. And those responsibilities are, I need to get the receipt in a timely manner. I need a description or a reason, some information, some substance behind why you purchased what you purchased, and the additional associated, accounting, geocoding, cost center data that the business or the finance team needs to capture. Following the policies is the processes, and that's all about how do we implement these policies in our business. What are your approval processes? We talk about it. If you're doing emails back and forth, text message calls to get payments approved or bills approved, it's just really not going to cut it these days for the vast majority of businesses. The role that technology plays is it's really to plug the gaps and automate steps in the process, and also to help you implement the policies. So bit of a spiel there, but I think that's kind of the most important role that tech plays. It's not to solve all of your problems, it's to actually complement the policies and processes that you've implemented. So I'm gonna share my screen and we'll do a quick dive into DiviPay and virtual cards. Virtual cards versus credit cards. There is a lot of content out there, and if as a business you are seriously considering making a switch to a virtual card platform, I would recommend giving it a Google and comparing those. I think on our website we might actually have a blog highlighting all the pros and cons of each one. I think at a really high level, the difference is we typically see credit cards or P cards or debit cards issued through traditional providers like the banks. Banks typically have the control of issuing and cancelling, and they often do determine the spending limits on those cards that are issued out across the business. The key difference between virtual cards is it's really the finance team has control, issue and cancel cards as you need, and you can even put specific, say, merchant blockers, restricting spend on things such as gambling, alcohol, pubs and clubs, if you know that employee only has specific spending needs, say it's office expenses, for example. Now, diving into DiviPay, we are a spend management platform, and what we are most well known for is our two-in-one solution for virtual cards and expense reporting. We really think about spend management as two sides of an equation, and we solve for it in consolidating those two sides. The first side is the payment piece, and that's all about how do we enable people within our business to make the payments that they need to do their jobs and help us run the operations of the business, whilst maintaining a tight level of control and visibility from the finance team. We solve this through the ability to issue virtual cards instantly and digitally with custom, one-time only or recurring spending limits. Off the back of that is the expense reporting piece, and that's making sure that we have the compliance and reporting behind every transaction to confirm what was spent, where it was spent, how much, and by who by. In our platform, we implement spend controls financial controls and spending limits through this premise of budgets. Budgets are really important in DiviPay. I do have 4 budgets, as you can see today. Forgive me, they are quite generic in this demo environment. That being said, operations and marketing are actually really common budgets that our customers do use. As a business, we see virtual cards being adopted from sole traders right up to some of Australia's largest non-profits and enterprise ASX listed businesses. And most commonly, we see budgets set up based on department, teams, locations, or cost centers can actually work really well. Running a budget in DiviPay, we're really doing 3 things. I'm setting spending limits, I'm issuing cards, and I am assigning approvers or reviewers over that spend. So I'm going to throw myself under the bus here, and we're going to create a budget for sales. They are quite commonly known for being overspenders or exuberant spenders, as we discussed earlier. And every budget that we generate, we set a top-up frequency. Hey, so for sales, do we want to give the team or the department an access to a recurring set of funds on a weekly, monthly, annual, or is it a one and done? They get $500 once off, and if they need funds again, we'll review it, and the finance team will top up their cards in their budget as needed. Let's keep things simple today. Let's do a monthly budget, $1,000 limit, and we've got 2 spenders in the sales team, James and Joseph. We also then assign approvers, and the role of approvers is, of course, to approve and review spend after it happens. But additionally, we have top-up requests where staff can request additional funds to their card or budget that then needs to go through a formal approval process through DiviPay, automated notifications and emails sent to approvers. And with this tool, we actually do see some of our customers issuing out $0 budgets, and staff actually have to request funds on a purchase by purchase basis. We can then set individual limits on the virtual cards issued. So rather than sharing the pool of funds under the budget, splitting it out individually. And then this is just for making sure we have accurate reporting and bookkeeping. We can assign expense codes, all of them, or just the specific expense codes that relate to that team. Trent, you actually work with a ton of accounting and bookkeeping partners who have a lot of clients. What are some of the common budgets or areas or teams within their clients' businesses that you see these budgets and virtual cards being issued across?
So the biggest one I always like, the biggest thing they draw to really quickly is the ability to issue cards quickly, but also delete them quickly. So if you're dealing with high turnover of staff, volunteers, where you're doing a lot of reimbursements, then being able to manage this through instantly issuing these cards in seconds is a real, not only a time saver, but helps them take back more control. So I've seen examples where we've set up mining clients where they have miners that just go walkabout sometimes. They just go about and they've taken their credit card that had, or gift card that had $2,000 on it or whatever it may be, and they can't get that back, which, you know, can be quite difficult. So being able to issue virtual cards in this scenario, set the limit, set the budget, and be able to delete that or put it on hold should that person, again, disappear or whatever it may be, puts more control back on the CFO and the business in that sense. So because I generally get a question like, does this work in every business? Is it good for certain businesses? It's actually the pain points that we follow that help determine whether something like this can be a good fit, and if you've got those problems to solve. If you've got someone that says, hey, can I borrow your card so I can pay for something? That's the easiest dead giveaway that there's a pain or a problem that you may not realize existed because you went through all the pain to get the card in the first place. So you said, I'm not going to do that for 10 more employees. These are the types of things that we see and hear, especially in the work that I do every single day.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess that takes me to another part of our platform and a section where we can issue additional virtual cards through DiviPay, and it's specifically for those recurring direct debits and payments, recurring payments in the month or the year for, you know, often subscription tools in business. Now this allows you to generate a unique card for each software tool with custom either monthly or annual spending limits. What's really awesome and the feedback that we get from our customers is that they love the control, but more importantly, those annoying scenarios where, hey, maybe the shared company card did get frauded and we had to terminate that card. Your 50, 60, 70 connected recurring payments actually default. And it's a pain to go, okay, what were we paying for? Who was using it? How do we reestablish those software tools? And some of those software vendors are quite strict, and they'll just cancel or pause your account until they receive payment. Now, I want to take a step away from DiviPay. We've kind of spoken heavily on virtual cards and how you can implement controls and manage spend there. I think an important piece of the puzzle is around bill payments, or basically just bank transfers, or EFT. There are some awesome providers out there that allow you to implement some strict compliance and processes around vendor or supplier bank account management for payments in the business. One that comes to mind, and this is not an ad, this is not sponsored, we are not in partnership, but it's EFT Sure. I would encourage everyone to jot them down or give them a Google and just save it and have a look after. They do a great job of preventing fraudulent bank transfers and EFT spend in business too.
Make sure you give them your referral code too, mate. Just a joke, just kidding.
Awesome. So look, I just want to, before we wrap up, quickly jump into the back end. Look, we are an expense management component too, and we do allow staff to upload receipts, code to the GL, and we pass this data to 3 key accounting systems with Xero, MYOB, and QuickBooks. Other systems, CSV, import, export, not ideal, but it still does the job for those larger ERPs that don't have a big network of apps that they can connect into. And importantly, for visibility and monitoring of spend, we have this real-time transaction feed. It is a bank statement, essentially a real-time bank feed built into DiviPay for all of the spend that would go across all employees and cards. But we just contain that additional data, knowing exactly who in the business made which payment, which budget it relates to, and then of course that ability that we automatically chase employees up for their receipts, GL coding, cost center data, for example. Trent, that is the DiviPay app, web app, mate. I'm going to hand back over to you.
Well done. If you could bring back those slides too, that'd be fantastic. So for this session, we've given you a run through of some of the pains and problems that we see across all organizations of all sizes, whether it's 5 employees or 500, it's common in every area. We've given you an example of some of the things that we do to help solve that problem with our virtual company card platform and expense management platform. The next piece really is just trying to help determine if this is something you think we might be able to help with. One of the first things we actually wanted to do, and I mentioned this at the start as a way of helping you understand how this technology can work, is actually give you a coffee card. So if you're interested in actually getting money from us, $5, and you can go and spend it on whatever you'd like. Some of the feedback I get is, Trent, I don't like coffee. And I'm like, look, I'm going to give you a virtual card with $5 on it. You can get a tea, a bottle of water, a beer, a wine. I don't mind. But if you would like a card with some money on it, and CPA team, if you'd like one, we're happy to send you one as well. But you can actually just send us an email. It's kale@divipay.com, and that's CALE, not the vegetable to be confused with, CALE@divipay.com, and we will send you a virtual card with money on it, and you can test out and see how easy it is to use a virtual company card. Gavin, I can see you, I already know you would want one of these, mate, so I can help organize that. Recapping points when we're talking about this kind of technology, there's no paperwork or bank visits. There's no card sharing. There's no staff reimbursements. Now, we do actually have a process to help with staff reimbursements where you can manage it in one platform and move that away from your payroll. But what we want you to think about is what does a world look like where you're not doing adjustments to payroll for reimbursements every single week? And that's something that we believe we can solve. But yeah, Gavin, great time to come back in. Going to see if there's any questions or anything we should wrap on, or if from your side, Gavin, any insights that you've picked up in this session so far?
Thank you.
Might be on mute.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation. I found it really interesting. Please ask questions, but I'll maybe start by saying, just going back to fraud and with technologies, what are some of the emerging fraud risks you're starting to see, both internal, but also obviously you mentioned the external side with the phishing attacks, but what are some of the emerging fraud risks you're seeing?
So with like internal, it's invoices and bills, account details getting changed. So if you don't have a really good process around payables and invoices coming into the business, how do you know that you're paying the right supplier the right amount of money? Like, have you verified and validated that the BSB and the account number actually matches what you've got on your client contact file side of things? Having dual approval for things is really important, I find, in some cases, because the person that is approving the bill is also, how do we keep them accountable to make sure they're not just approving bills to pay themselves, right? So we think about audit trails, we think about that kind of accountability. And then when you've got, I used to work in an organization where if the expense was under $75, don't worry about the receipt. We don't need it. We don't want it. So if I, saw some people picked up the merchant was a bit vague and they could get away with just saying, oh, this was a meeting with the client or whatever, but really it was an electronic shop and they bought something for themselves for $50. So people try to hide their purchases where they can. So once they understand your system and how it works and you create policy saying, we don't want all the receipts, you're opening yourself up to people going, well, how can I use this to my advantage? They're the typical things that we see all the time, to be honest, Gavin. They're the main ones. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think one thing accountants have is a skeptical mind, and I think that's important. That mentality, that culture that you have is really important to controlling fraud in all sorts of scenarios. So even with new technologies that are emerging, that skeptical mind going, why are you changing that bank account? I think I'd just give that company a call just to see, have you changed your bank account? So just like things like that. I was going to ask a question, Kale, before we get on to some of the questions around, does DiviPay collect aggregate data, and can your clients see how their spend compares against some of your aggregate data?
Sorry, I'll jump in, Trent. I think that's a really interesting question, and it's something that we've discussed quite heavily internally. Look, at the moment, it's not data that we do make available in the app to kind of see industry trends or anything, but we do have it on our end. And I think over the course of next year, as a kind of first step to making this data available, is we'll kind of pull our own reports and do some write-ups, some blogs and ebooks providing this content and showing the trends. I think one of the exciting things that we've noticed, just businesses across the board, is the significant increase in spend from our customers coming out of lockdowns, which is just an awesome sign, and one of the things that we can see, we're at the forefront of seeing kind of this recovery of the economy, which is awesome.
And there's a question from Kokila about, can you get your virtual card from your current provider bank?
So look, at DiviPay, we issue cards that run on MasterCard's payment rails. Look, we're not the only virtual card provider out there. There are others. I'm not aware that MX provides virtual cards, but the places that you see virtual cards are typically kind of more modern neo banks that can issue them. And one that comes to mind is TransferWise, who are great for like overseas payments and things of that nature. There's very few, or I think we might be the only one that does the virtual cards and the expense management in Australia. But yeah, there are.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. Just from the company cards perspective, I think some of the banks have adopted personal spending through digital wallets and things like that. But we're pretty, for those that didn't know, good fun trivia, DiviPay was the first company card available digitally in the Apple and Google wallets in Australia back in 2017, which was pretty cool for us in that sense. But we haven't seen too much. There's a lot of happening overseas, I find. If you look at the UK and the US, there's a lot of investment going into this space. But yeah, we're pretty fortunate at the moment to be sort of front running and leading what the standard for this kind of technology is in Australia, which yeah, we're stoked and thrilled about.
There's a couple of questions for Luciana, which I think Kyle, you already responded to, but would this budget function work as a virtual card limit per business unit rather than per individual?
Yeah, it can, and I think I've seen in a number of cases that work really well. Budgets are really flexible. We have some customers that go really granular with their budgets and even set them up based on specific GL codes. I probably tend to err more on the side of setting them up based on different business units and cost centers, different locations that you operate from. That would be my advice and the best way to set them up.
And another question from Luciano is, any plans to integrate with SAP?
So I did write a response to this, but I'll kind of share it with the broader group. We don't integrate with SAP or some of the larger enterprise or ERP systems at the moment. Today, you can export the CSV kind of bank statement and transactional GL coding from our system and import it across. But that being said, we do have some aggressive development plans throughout the next year, so 2022, to bring more ERP and accounting systems under our API. So can't commit to any timeframes or names yet, but more to come on that over the coming months.
And that, as you said, you've already written a response, and
yeah,
I think the question's also very similar to Jennifer Pike's around all accounting software. So I think you've answered that. Do we have any other questions coming through? Question here from Trang. How does DiviPay capture overseas expenses? Can DiviPay be used to pay online?
We certainly can. So within the DiviPay mobile app, you're actually able to get your 16-digit card details. So when I want to go and spend something online through a website, I just open up the mobile phone, get my 16 digits, get my CVC number specific to that budget, and then I can spend online as per normal. So I'll get a digital version of the receipt. I upload that into DiviPay, which flows through into my cloud accounting software, or as mentioned, you export the information out and then import it into your systems.
And the other element to Trang's question is, I'm not sure whether this is probably the right approach, but can DiviPay be used to pay online where we engage with a freelancer located outside Australia?
Yes, you can. So as long as they've got an ability to process card payments, so Visa, well, in this case, MasterCard, then yes, you can.
And a question from Colin is, what's the costs? Obviously, I don't think there would be a one particular answer to that, but obviously I'll let you try.
The real simple version is it's just based on the number of users. So the number of card users you've got in the business determines the payment that you're paying with DiviPay. The pricing is on the website. So if everyone does go to divipay.com, click on the pricing tab, you can see the way we do the price breakdown. But if you are interested in looking at this in more detail for your self, for your business, feel free to. Oops.
Good. How are you going?
Kale, can you finish that?
Oh, sorry. I think there was some background noise.
You're on mute, Trent.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys. I'll finish this off. So yeah, look, we're very transparent with pricing. Jump on the website and look, if you want to learn more, just fill out one of the forms on our website and someone will give you a quick call. I think that really wraps things up from our end. If you're interested, send Trent an email as well, trent@divipay.com. Just mention that you attended this webinar, and we'll be able to sort you out.
Sorry about that, guys. I had something going in the background. But yeah, to Kale's point, thanks for your time. Any questions, please feel free. You can email trent@divipay.com. If you would like a coffee card or a card to spend money on, Gavin, coming your way. Kale's actually told me it's $10 as well. I was being tight saying $5. It's a $10 card. We've doubled. So if you're interested in that, you can obviously get access by emailing myself or Kale, and we'll make that happen. But thanks, CPA, for having us. We hope everyone's had a great time. Gavin, really appreciate your time to jump in and help us out with the start of the session.
Well, once again, thanks to Kale and Trent for what I thought was a really interesting, thoughtful presentation, and I got quite a lot from it. And if you have any questions, please email to Trent or Kale after this. And I now hand back to Lauren to finish up the session.
Amazing. Thanks, Gavin. And thanks, Trent, and thanks, Kale. And thanks everyone for your participation. In the next 3 working days, you'll receive an evaluation survey accompanied by the recording of this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, as it is extremely valuable to CPA Australia to help us deliver better events for you. Thanks again, and we look forward to welcoming you to another CPA Australia webinar soon.
Thank you. Thanks, DiviPay.
Thanks a lot, everyone.